I learned the hard way that being helpful to your neighbors can backfire spectacularly when those neighbors happen to be on the homeowner association board. My name is Gregory Quinlan, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision in Rochester, Minnesota, for 3 winters when everything went sideways. Rochester gets serious snow, the kind that buries cars overnight and turns morning commutes into Arctic expeditions. Being a freelance software developer who works from home, I had a snow blower and plenty of time on my hands during those brutal January mornings. So I started a routine that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. Every Monday and Thursday morning at 6, I would fire up my commercial-grade snow blower and clear not just my driveway, but also the main pathway leading to the subdivision's community center. The community center sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, about 3 houses down from mine, and it was where the HOA held their twice-monthly board meetings. The pathway from the parking lot to the entrance was maybe 50 yards long, but it collected snow like a dedicated collector. Since I was already out there turning frozen precipitation into airborne powder, it seemed neighborly to make sure people could actually walk into the building without ending up face first in a snowdrift. For 2.5 winters, nobody said a word. I got occasional waves from neighbors scraping ice off their windshields. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought me cookies once. Harold Jenkins, the elderly guy who lived next to the community center, even gave me a thumbs up one particularly brutal morning when I cleared the path during a blizzard that dropped 14 inches overnight. Then came the morning of January 9th, when I discovered that no good deed goes unpunished, especially in a neighborhood governed by people with too much free time and an inflated sense of authority. I was in my kitchen, halfway through my second cup of coffee, when I heard the aggressive knock on my front door. The kind of knock that suggests the person on the other side believes they have the moral high ground and intend to weaponize it. I opened the door to find Brenda Carmichael standing on my porch, wearing a puffy white coat that made her look like an agitated marshmallow. Brenda was the HOA president, a 52-year-old woman whose favorite hobby appeared to be finding violations in other people's lives. "Gregory," she said, her breath forming angry little clouds in the frigid air, "we need to talk about your unauthorized snow removal activities." I blinked at her. "My what now?" "You have been operating heavy machinery on HOA common property without board approval," she said, pulling out a folder that she had apparently been keeping under her coat. "According to Section 12, Paragraph 8 of the Meadowbrook Hills Covenant, all modifications, maintenance, or alterations to common areas must be submitted in writing to the board and approved by a majority vote before any action is taken." "Brenda, I am just clearing snow," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "The same snow I have been clearing for almost 3 years. "Unauthorized snow clearing," she corrected, tapping the folder with one gloved finger. "We have had complaints." "Complaints? From who?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "The board has received complaints. That is all you need to know. Effective immediately, you are to cease all snow removal activities on HOA property. Any future violations will result in fines of $100 per occurrence." I stood there in my doorway, cold air rushing past her into my warm house, trying to process what I was hearing. "You are telling me I cannot clear the path to the community center anymore?" "That is correct. The board will be arranging for professional snow removal services to handle all common areas. Your freelance assistance is no longer required or welcome." She handed me a formal letter that outlined everything she had just said, complete with citations to various covenant sections. "Have a good day, Gregory." She turned and marched back down my driveway, her boots crunching in the snow that I had cleared 2 days earlier during the last storm. I watched her get into her silver Lexus and drive away, then looked down at the letter in my hands. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, dated that morning and signed by all 5 board members: Brenda Carmichael, Linda Morrison, Patricia Hughes, Robert Chen, and David Sullivan. I went back inside and read the entire thing twice. It was real. They were seriously banning me from clearing snow off a public pathway. The letter even threatened legal action if I persisted in my unauthorized maintenance activities on community property. Fine. If that was how they wanted to play it, I could follow rules too. I sent a brief email acknowledging receipt of their letter and confirming that I would no longer clear any HOA property. I did not mention that their next board meeting was scheduled for January 13th, just 4 days away, or that the weather forecast was predicting another major snowstorm on the 12th. My neighbor, Tom Richards, stopped by that afternoon. Tom was a straightforward guy who worked as an electrician and had zero patience for bureaucratic nonsense. "Did Brenda really tell you to stop clearing the path?" he asked, standing in my doorway with a look of disbelief. "Official letter and everything," I confirmed, showing him the document. He read it and shook his head. "This is insane. You have been doing them a favor. The HOA doesn't have a snow removal contract. At least they didn't last time I checked the budget at the annual meeting." "Not my problem anymore," I said with a shrug. "They made their position clear." Tom grinned. "The meeting on Thursday is going to be interesting. They are predicting 8 to 10 inches Tuesday night." "Is that right?" I said innocently. "Well, I am sure their professional snow removal service will handle it." Tuesday night arrived right on schedule, bringing with it the kind of snowstorm that makes meteorologists use words like significant accumulation and hazardous conditions. I watched from my living room window as the snow fell in thick, heavy curtains, building up on driveways, yards, and yes, the pathway to the community center. By Wednesday morning, we had received 11 inches of fresh powder, with drifts in some areas reaching 2 feet. I fired up my snow blower at 6 in the morning, just like always. I cleared my driveway with methodical precision, then did my front walk, then my sidewalk. Then I went back inside, made breakfast, and watched the morning news. I did not touch the pathway to the community center. I did not even look in that direction for longer than it took to notice that it was, indeed, buried under nearly a foot of undisturbed snow. Around 9, Tom called me. "Did you see the community center parking lot?" "I saw snow," I replied. "Nobody has touched it. The pathway looks like an Arctic tundra, and I just saw Brenda drive by 3 times, probably checking to make sure you didn't clear it." "I follow the rules," I said. "I am a model homeowner." Thursday morning arrived clear and cold. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 that evening, which meant board members would start arriving around 6:30 to set up. I spent the day working on a client project, periodically glancing out my window toward the community center. The snow remained pristine and untouched. No professional snow removal service materialized. No board members came by with shovels. The pathway sat there, buried and impassable, like a small-scale recreation of the Donner Pass. At 6:15, I heard the first car pull into the community center parking lot. I wandered over to my front window with a cup of coffee and watched the entertainment unfold. Brenda's silver Lexus was parked at an angle near the pathway entrance. I could see her sitting in the driver's seat, staring at the snow-covered path with what I imagined was growing horror. At 6:23, Linda Morrison arrived in her black SUV. She parked next to Brenda, and I watched them both get out and meet near the beginning of the pathway. Even from my house, I could see the animated gesturing. Linda appeared to be pointing at the snow while Brenda waved her hands in explanation. Neither of them made any move to actually walk through the knee-deep snow. Patricia Hughes showed up at 6:28. She pulled up, got out, assessed the situation, and immediately got back into her car. I assumed she was calling someone, probably the other board members. Robert Chen and David Sullivan arrived together at 6:35. All 5 board members now stood in the parking lot, forming a small huddle of frustration and poor planning. I watched Robert gesture toward the community center entrance, visible but entirely inaccessible without trudging through nearly 2 feet of accumulated snow and ice. At 6:40, I saw Brenda pull out her phone. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. "Gregory," Brenda's voice came through with a forced sweetness that was almost insulting. "Hi, this is Brenda Carmichael from the HOA." "Hello, Brenda," I said pleasantly. "So, we are at the community center for tonight's board meeting, and it seems that our snow removal service did not come by after Tuesday's storm." "That is unfortunate," I replied. There was a pause. "Yes. Well, we were wondering if you might be able to bring your snow blower down and clear the pathway. Just for tonight, it would be very helpful." "I would love to help," I said, making sure my tone stayed friendly and cooperative. "But I cannot." "What do you mean you cannot?" "Your letter from Monday was very clear. I am not authorized to perform snow removal on HOA property. Section 12, Paragraph 8 of the Covenant. You also mentioned that violations would result in $100 fines. I am just following the rules." The pause this time was longer. I could almost hear her teeth grinding. "Gregory, we have a meeting that starts in 20 minutes. Then you should probably figure out how to get into the building," I suggested. "Maybe you could reschedule, or have everyone wade through the snow. I hear it is good exercise. This is ridiculous. You have been clearing this path for years. And on Monday, you banned me from doing so, in writing, with legal threats. We didn't think," she stopped herself. "Did not think what? That you might actually need the free snow removal service I was providing, that Minnesota gets snow in January. That banning people from helping might have consequences." Her voice went cold. "Are you seriously refusing to help clear snow during an emergency?" "This is not an emergency, Brenda. This is poor planning. An emergency would be a medical crisis or a fire. This is just a walkway that nobody bothered to clear because you banned the person who was doing it for free and apparently never arranged for an actual replacement service." "The board will hear about this," she said. "The board is standing in a parking lot watching this phone call," I pointed out. "I am sure they are already hearing about it." She hung up without another word. I returned to my window and watched the 5 board members have what appeared to be an extremely heated discussion. Brenda was gesturing wildly. Robert had his hands on his hips in the universal posture of frustration. Patricia kept pointing at her watch. At 6:52 they gave up. I watched all 5 of them trudge through the snow toward the community center entrance, high-stepping through the drifts like a team of very unhappy Arctic explorers. Brenda fell once, catching herself on her hands. David lost a shoe and had to dig it out of the snow. Linda gave up halfway and went back to get a shovel from her car, then spent 10 minutes carving a minimal path that the others used single file. They made it inside at 7:15. The meeting that was supposed to start at 7 presumably began late, with 5 board members who were cold, wet, and keenly aware of their own stupidity. I slept very well that night. Friday morning, I was up at 6 as usual, clearing my own property. The sun was just coming up when Tom came over, grinning like it was Christmas morning. I heard from Linda's husband, Mark. Tom said. Apparently last night's meeting was a complete disaster. They couldn't get the heat working right because the building had been closed up and cold for so long. Everyone was soaked from trudging through the snow, and they spent 45 minutes arguing about who was supposed to arrange snow removal. Who was supposed to arrange it? I asked. Brenda swore she had told Robert to handle it. Robert said Brenda never mentioned it. Patricia said they never voted on a budget line item for snow removal services. David pointed out that they just banned their free snow removal. Linda apparently asked why they banned you in the first place. Why did they? Tom's grin got wider. According to Mark, Brenda complained that your snow blower was too loud at 6 in the morning. She said it was disturbing her peace and quiet. I stared at him. She lives 4 houses away from me on the other side of the street. Yep. Apparently she is a light sleeper. Patricia backed her up because she thought you were trying to position yourself for some kind of official HOA role by doing favors. Robert just went along with whatever Brenda wanted because she scares him. So they banned me from clearing snow because Brenda does not like being woken up, and Patricia thinks I am politically ambitious. In a nutshell, I laughed. I could not help it. The entire situation was so absurd that laughter was the only reasonable response. What did they decide about future snow removal? They tabled the discussion until the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, January 27th, and the forecast, Tom checked his phone, looks like we might get snow next Wednesday, maybe another storm next weekend. This should be interesting, I said. The snow on Wednesday was lighter, only about 4 inches. I cleared my property and went about my day. The community center pathway received a few inches of fresh accumulation on top of the compressed snow from the previous storm. Nobody cleared it. By Thursday, it had frozen into an icy, uneven mess. I got another letter on Friday. This one informed me that the board was reassessing its snow removal policies, and that I should refrain from any premature action regarding common area maintenance. It was bureaucratic speak for we screwed up but are not ready to admit it yet. The weekend storm arrived Sunday night, dropping another 7 inches. Monday morning, I cleared my driveway while the pathway to the community center accumulated more snow. The pile was now a compressed, layered mess of ice and powder that reached mid-shin even in the shallower areas. Tuesday afternoon, I received a phone call from Robert Chen. Robert was the most reasonable member of the board, a 55-year-old engineer who generally tried to avoid drama. Gregory, this is Robert Chen from the HOA board. Hi, Robert. Listen. I want to apologize for how this whole situation has been handled. The board made a hasty decision based on incomplete information, and we are now dealing with the consequences. I appreciate you saying that, I said, genuinely surprised by the direct approach. The truth is, we do not have a snow removal contract. We have never needed one because you were taking care of the pathway. We took that for granted. And then we banned you from doing it for reasons that, in hindsight, were not good reasons. So what happens now? The board is meeting tonight to vote on rescinding the ban and issuing a formal apology. I am calling to give you a heads up and to ask if you would be willing to resume your snow removal assistance if the ban is lifted. Robert, I am going to be honest with you. I am not inclined to help people who threatened me with legal action for doing them a favor. He sighed. I understand completely. For what it is worth, I voted against the original ban. So did David. But Brenda, Patricia, and Linda outvoted us. Why did they vote for it? Brenda said you were being too loud. Patricia thought you were trying to curry favor for some future political move. Linda just follows whatever Brenda says. Tom mentioned that. It is ridiculous. It absolutely is, Robert agreed. Look, I cannot promise anything, but I am going to do my best tonight to get this reversed. The board meeting is at 7, same as always. If we vote to rescind the ban, would you at least consider helping clear the path before the next meeting? When is the next meeting? 2 weeks from Thursday. January 27th. I thought about it. Robert was being reasonable and honest, which I appreciated. If the board formally rescinds the ban in writing, apologizes for the baseless threats, and commits to not interfering with my voluntary snow removal in the future, I will consider it. That is fair. I will push for exactly that. There is one more thing, I added. What is that? The pathway needs to be cleared before tonight's meeting. I assume you have noticed it is currently an ice rink with decorative snow piles. Robert laughed, but it was the tired laugh of a man who had spent too much time dealing with preventable problems. Yeah, we noticed. We are planning to get here early and shovel. Should only take us an hour or two. Good luck with that, I said. That evening, I kept an eye on the community center parking lot. Board members started arriving at 5:30, a full 90 minutes early. I watched as Robert, David, and surprisingly Linda showed up with shovels and started attacking the frozen pathway. Brenda arrived at 6 and stood by her car, arms crossed, clearly refusing to participate. Patricia showed up at 6:15 and joined the shoveling effort, though her contribution looked more symbolic than effective. By 7, they had managed to clear a narrow, treacherous path through the ice and compacted snow. It was maybe 2 feet wide and looked like it had been carved by determined but unskilled archaeologists. All 4 shovelers looked exhausted as they trudged into the building. Brenda walked in like a queen, having contributed nothing but supervision and what I imagined was a steady stream of criticism. I received an email at 8:30 that night. It was from the HOA board, sent to all residents, announcing that the board had voted 4-1 to rescind the snow removal ban on my voluntary maintenance activities. The email included a brief apology for any confusion or inconvenience caused by the previous policy. It was signed by Robert Chen, David Sullivan, Linda Morrison, and Patricia Hughes. Brenda's name was notably absent. The email was fine, but it was not what Robert and I had discussed. It did not include any commitment to not interfere in the future, and the apology was so vague it barely qualified as an apology. I sent Robert a text message pointing this out. He called me 15 minutes later. I know the email was not what we discussed. Brenda refused to agree to any stronger language. We voted her down on rescinding the ban, but she is still the president and she controls the official communications. This was the best I could get through. So she's still mad about being proven wrong. She is furious. She spent 20 minutes arguing that you were being deliberately obstructive and that the board should fine you for refusing to help during the snow emergency last week. The fake emergency where you were just late to a meeting. That is the one. Patricia actually agreed with you on that point, which surprised everyone. She said that if we were going to ban someone from doing something, we could not then demand they do it anyway when it became inconvenient for us. Patricia said that, I know, character development. She is still not your biggest fan, but I think she is starting to realize that Brenda makes decisions emotionally rather than rationally. What happened to the vote? 4-1 to rescind the ban. Brenda was the only no vote. Then we spent another 30 minutes arguing about the apology language. That was 3-2, with Linda siding with Brenda on keeping the apology vague. So where does that leave us? Honestly, I think you should do what you think is right. If you want to resume clearing the path, the official ban is lifted and you will not face any fines or legal threats. If you do not want to help, nobody can force you. Just know that I personally appreciate everything you have done, and I am sorry this turned into such a mess. Robert was a good guy stuck in a bad situation. I told him I would think about it and let him know. I thought about it for 2 days. During that time, we got another 3 inches of snow on Thursday night. I cleared my property on Friday morning and left the community center pathway alone. It sat there, a monument to poor leadership and community mismanagement. Friday afternoon, Mrs. Patterson from across the street knocked on my door. She was 78 years old and had lived in Meadowbrook Hills since the subdivision was built. "Gregory, dear, I wanted to talk to you about the HOA situation," she said, accepting my invitation to come in for tea. "What about it?" I asked, setting a cup in front of her at my kitchen table. "I think what they did to you was terrible. You have been nothing but helpful to this community, and Brenda repaid you by threatening legal action over noise complaints that nobody else had. You heard about the noise complaints. Dear, everyone has heard about everything. This neighborhood has better information distribution than the CIA. I wanted you to know that several of us are very unhappy with how the board handled this situation. Several of you." She pulled out a piece of paper. "I took the liberty of collecting signatures. 23 households have signed a petition calling for Brenda to step down as HOA president. That is more than half the neighborhood." I looked at the petition. It was handwritten on lined notebook paper, but the signatures were real and the statement was clear. The undersigned residents had no confidence in Brenda Carmichael's leadership and called for her immediate resignation. "Mrs. Patterson, this is quite something," I said, genuinely impressed. "We are tired of her nonsense, Gregory. This snow situation was just the latest example. Last year, she tried to ban decorative garden gnomes because she said they were tacky. The year before, she attempted to enforce a rule about grass height that was nowhere in the actual covenant. She rules through intimidation and makes up rules to suit her personal preferences. What are you planning to do with this? I am going to present it at the next board meeting. January 27th. I am hoping you will be there to support it." I agreed to attend the meeting. The next week passed quietly, with only minor snow dustings that required minimal clearing. I took care of my own property and continued to leave the community center pathway alone. The narrow path that the board members had carved remained passable, but looked increasingly shabby compared to the clean, wide clearing I used to provide. The Wednesday before the January 27th meeting, Minnesota delivered another classic storm. This one was particularly nasty, combining snow with sleet and freezing rain. We got 6 inches of heavy, wet snow topped with a layer of ice that made everything look like it had been dipped in glass. It was beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Thursday morning, I cleared my property, taking extra time to break up the ice layer. It was brutal work, even with a good snow blower. The community center pathway looked like a disaster area. The previous narrow path now completely buried under new snow and ice, with the old compacted snow underneath, creating a layered cake of frozen misery. I got a text from Robert at 10 in the morning. "Any chance you could clear the path before tonight? We'll pay you personally." I texted back, "Appreciate the offer, but I think tonight's meeting needs to happen with things as they are. Some conversations are better when everyone can see the concrete results of their decisions." He responded, "Understood. Bring popcorn." The meeting was scheduled for 7. I showed up at 6:50, parking in the community center lot and approaching the barely visible pathway. Several other residents were already there, apparently having had the same idea I did. The board members were once again attempting to shovel their way through, but this time the ice layer was making it nearly impossible. I watched David take 3 swings with a shovel at a particularly thick ice patch without making any visible progress. Mrs. Patterson arrived at 6:55, walking carefully across the parking lot with her cane. I offered her my arm and helped her navigate the treacherous path that the board members had partially cleared. We made it inside just as the meeting was called to order. The community center meeting room was packed. I counted at least 40 residents, which was probably triple the usual attendance. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Brenda sat at the front table with the other board members, her expression suggesting she had just bitten into a lemon. "This meeting of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association is now called to order," Brenda announced, banging a small gavel on the table. "We will begin with the approval of last meeting's minutes, followed by the treasurer's report, and then move to old business." Mrs. Patterson raised her hand. "Point of order. I would like to add an item to new business." Brenda's jaw tightened. "The agenda was set 3 days ago. Any new items must be submitted in writing at least 72 hours before the meeting. Then, I am formally requesting that my item be heard under the community comments section." Mrs. Patterson countered smoothly. The covenant required that every meeting include a community comments section where any resident could speak for up to 3 minutes on any topic. Brenda knew this, and she knew she could not refuse without violating the rules she was supposed to uphold. "Fine," Brenda said curtly. "We will hear community comments after the committee reports." The meeting dragged on for 45 minutes of tedious updates about treasurer reports, landscaping committee plans for spring, and a lengthy discussion about whether the neighborhood entrance sign needed repainting. Finally, Brenda announced it was time for community comments. Mrs. Patterson stood up slowly, using her cane for support. She walked to the front of the room and turned to face the assembled residents. "My name is Alina Patterson, and I have lived in Meadowbrook Hills for 19 years. In that time, I have seen this HOA do some good things and some foolish things, but nothing has been quite as foolish as the recent situation with Gregory Quinlan and snow removal." She had everyone's attention now. Brenda's face was turning red. For 3 winters, Gregory volunteered his time, equipment, and effort to clear the pathway to this building. He did this at 6 in the morning before most of us were awake, asking nothing in return. He made it safe for us to attend meetings, use the community center, and access our shared spaces. And how did this board repay him? They banned him. They threatened him with fines and legal action. Why? Because the president does not like the sound of his snow blower. "Mrs. Patterson, that is an oversimplification," Brenda interrupted. "Is it?" "Because I have spoken to 3 board members who confirmed that the primary complaint came from you, Brenda, and was about noise. You live 4 houses away from Gregory. The rest of us are much closer, and nobody else complained." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Brenda looked like she wanted to use the gavel on something other than the table. "The result of this board's decision has been obvious to anyone paying attention," Mrs. Patterson continued. "The pathway has been a mess for weeks. Board members have had to arrive early to do inadequate clearing themselves. Tonight, I watched 4 people spend 90 minutes trying to clear ice and snow because this board was too proud to admit they made a mistake." She pulled out the petition. "I have here a petition signed by 23 households calling for Brenda Carmichael to resign as HOA president. That represents 53% of our neighborhood. I am submitting this formally to the board and requesting that it be addressed at the next meeting." She handed the petition to Robert, who looked it over and nodded confirmation. Brenda snatched it from him and scanned the signatures, her face going from red to purple. "This is completely inappropriate," Brenda sputtered. "You cannot just..." Section 7 of the HOA bylaws allows for a vote of no confidence in any board officer if requested by petition of at least 40% of residents, Mrs. Patterson said calmly. We have exceeded that threshold. The board is required to hold such a vote within 30 days. Robert was trying very hard not to smile. David had given up and was openly grinning. Patricia looked shocked, and Linda looked like she was trying to decide which side to be on. Brenda looked defeated. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a community comment? Robert asked, clearly enjoying his role in the proceedings. Tom Richards stood up. Yeah, I have got something to say. This whole situation has been ridiculous from start to finish. Gregory was helping us out of the goodness of his heart, and the board punished him for it. Now we are all suffering because nobody wants to admit they were wrong. I move that the board formally apologize to Gregory, in writing, with specific language acknowledging that the ban was unjustified and thanking him for his years of volunteer service. I second that motion, called out Harold Jenkins from the back of the room. Brenda looked like she had been slapped. That is not how motions work in community comments. Actually, Robert interjected, checking the covenant binder in front of him. Section 9 allows any motion raised in community comments to be added to new business if it receives a second. The motion has been made and seconded. We need to vote on it. Fine, Brenda snapped. All in favor of wasting time on pointless apologies. That is not appropriate phrasing for a vote, Patricia said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She cleared her throat and continued, the motion should be stated neutrally. I move that the board issue a formal written apology to Gregory Quinlan acknowledging that the snow removal ban was implemented without sufficient justification, and thanking him for his volunteer service to the community. I second that properly stated motion, David said immediately. Robert called for a vote. All in favor, Robert, David, and Patricia raised their hands. That was 3 out of 5, a majority. Motion passes, Robert announced. The board will draft and deliver a formal apology to Gregory Quinlan within 1 week. Brenda stood up abruptly. I am calling for a 5-minute recess. She stormed out of the room. Linda followed her like a confused puppy. The rest of us sat in the meeting room, exchanging looks and quiet conversation. Mrs. Patterson made her way back to her seat next to me. That went well, she whispered. You are a force of nature, I replied. When Brenda and Linda returned 5 minutes later, Brenda looked composed but cold. She resumed her seat and picked up the gavel. We will now move to the formal vote of no confidence, since apparently that is happening tonight instead of at a future meeting, she said icily. The bylaws require it within 30 days, not at the next meeting, Robert corrected. We can schedule a special meeting within the required time frame. Let's just get it over with, Brenda said. I am calling for a vote of no confidence in my position as HOA president. This vote requires a simple majority of residents present at the meeting. All residents in favor of a vote of no confidence, raise your hands. I looked around the room. Hands went up one by one. I counted them silently. 28 hands. In a meeting with about 40 residents present, that was 70%. Opposed? Brenda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 7 hands went up, mostly people who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Abstaining. 5 residents kept their hands down, including me. I had not signed the petition because I wanted this to be about the community standing up for itself, not about me seeking revenge. Robert did the official count. 28 in favor, 7 opposed, 5 abstentions. The vote of no confidence passes. Per the bylaws, Brenda Carmichael is removed as HOA president effective immediately. The board will need to elect a new president from among the remaining board members. Brenda stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the meeting without another word. Linda looked torn between following her and staying, ultimately deciding to stay. The remaining board members huddled for a quick discussion. Then Robert addressed the room. The board has nominated me to serve as interim president until the annual meeting in March, at which point all board positions will be up for election as scheduled. All in favor, David, Patricia, and Linda all raised their hands. It was unanimous among the remaining board members. Motion passes. I am now serving as HOA president. My first official act is to formally invite Gregory Quinlan to resume his voluntary snow clearing services, with the board's sincere appreciation and a commitment that we will not interfere with his maintenance schedule in any way. Gregory, would you be willing to do that? Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up, feeling oddly like I was accepting an award I had not wanted. I appreciate the board's apology and the community's support. I am willing to resume clearing the pathway to the community center, with a few conditions. Name them, Robert said. First, I wanted in writing that my snow clearing is voluntary and can be stopped by me at any time without penalty or complaint. Second, I want confirmation that no board member will file noise complaints or other grievances related to my maintenance activities, unless they constitute an actual violation of city ordinances. Third, I want a formal written apology from the board, as was voted on tonight, acknowledging the mistakes that were made. All three conditions are completely reasonable, Robert said. I will have the written agreements and apology delivered to you by this Sunday. Does that work? That works, I agreed. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that, with residents filing out into the cold night and navigating the treacherous pathway one last time in its poorly maintained state. I helped Mrs. Patterson back to her car, thanking her again for organizing the petition. You are a good neighbor, Gregory, she said, patting my arm. Do not let people take advantage of that, but do not let their foolishness stop you from being who you are. That Sunday, Robert delivered the written agreements and apology personally. The apology was 2 pages long and thorough, acknowledging every mistake the board had made and specifically naming the unjustified noise complaints and the inappropriate legal threats. It was signed by Robert, David, Patricia, and Linda. There was a note at the bottom explaining that Brenda had declined to sign. She is not taking this well, Robert said when I asked about Brenda's absence from the signature line. She tried to convince Linda to vote against me for president, but Linda finally broke away from her influence. Patricia told me that Brenda is talking about suing the HOA for unlawful termination. Can she do that? Her lawyer will probably tell her no. Everything we did was by the book, following the exact procedures laid out in the bylaws. She was removed by a legitimate vote of no confidence with overwhelming community support. She does not have a legal leg to stand on. Is she going to move? Robert shrugged. No idea. She is still on the board technically, just not the president. Her term runs through the March annual meeting. After that, she will have to run for re-election like everyone else, and I am guessing her chances are not great. The next snowfall came on Tuesday, January 31st. I was up at 6 in the morning, snow blower roaring to life in the frigid air. I cleared my driveway, then my walkway, then headed down to the community center. The pathway took me about 40 minutes to clear completely, creating the wide, clean path that I used to provide. It felt good to be doing it again, but on my own terms this time, with proper recognition and agreements in place. February brought 3 more significant snowfalls. I cleared after each one, maintaining the pathway and making sure the community center remained accessible. Nobody complained about the noise. Several neighbors waved or gave thumbs up as I worked. Tom brought me a thermos of coffee one particularly cold morning. Mrs. Patterson left a plate of cookies on my porch with a thank you note. The annual meeting in March was packed. It seemed like every household sent at least one representative, all wanting to vote in the board elections. Brenda showed up but sat in the back, silent and sullen. When nominations opened for board positions, she was not nominated by anyone, not even Linda. The community elected a new 5-member board. Robert Chen remained and was re-elected as president. David Sullivan stayed on. Patricia Hughes kept her seat, and 2 new members joined. Tom Richards and a woman named Susan Miller, who had lived in the neighborhood for 6 years and worked as an accountant. Linda Morrison chose not to run for re-election, saying she wanted to focus on her family. The new board's first action was to pass a formal resolution thanking me for my continued volunteer snow removal service and committing HOA funds to reimburse me for fuel and equipment maintenance. I had not asked for reimbursement, but I accepted it graciously. It amounted to about $150 per month during snow season, which barely covered my actual costs, but was a nice gesture of appreciation. Brenda moved out of Meadowbrook Hills in late April. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, Tom had heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was relocating to a condo in Minneapolis, where she would not have to deal with HOA drama. The irony of an HOA president fleeing to escape homeowner associations was not lost on anyone. Her house sold in 3 weeks to a young couple with 2 kids who introduced themselves to the neighborhood by bringing over homemade bread and asking who handled snow removal in the winter. Tom gleefully pointed them in my direction, and they thanked me profusely for keeping the community center accessible. The next winter came and went without incident. I maintained my 6 in the morning snow clearing schedule, the pathway stayed clear, and the board meetings proceeded smoothly. Robert turned out to be an excellent president, running meetings efficiently and making decisions based on what was best for the community rather than personal grievances. In January of the following year, almost exactly 2 years after the original ban, the board voted to install a small plaque near the community center entrance. It read, Meadowbrook Hills Community Center Pathway, maintained by Gregory Quinlan, volunteer. Tom organized a small ceremony for the installation, which was embarrassing but also touching. Mrs. Patterson gave a short speech about the importance of recognizing those who serve their community without seeking recognition. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons about homeowner associations, community dynamics, and human nature. I learned that some people wield small amounts of power like weapons, using rules and regulations to control others rather than to serve the common good. I learned that standing up for yourself, even in seemingly petty disputes, matters because principles matter. I learned that most people are reasonable and will support what is right if given the chance. But mostly I learned that helping your neighbors is still worthwhile, even when some neighbors are ungrateful or actively hostile. The key is setting boundaries and making sure your help is appreciated rather than exploited. Do good things because they are good, not because you expect reward or recognition, but also do not let people punish you for your generosity. These days, my snow blower fires up every winter morning after a storm, right at 6 o'clock. The sound echoes through the cold Minnesota air, clearing driveways and pathways, making the neighborhood a little more accessible and a little more connected. If anyone complains about the noise, I have not heard about it. And even if they did, I have written agreements, board resolutions, and a whole community of people who understand the difference between a nuisance and a neighbor doing his best. The pathway to the community center is clear. The board meetings run on time. And Brenda, wherever she is, has hopefully learned that banning people from helping you is a terrible strategy that will inevitably backfire when you actually need their help. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes it is just doing the right thing and letting other people experience the natural consequences of their own poor decisions. And sometimes it is watching those people trudge through knee-deep snow while you drink coffee in your warm house, knowing that you offered to help and they told you not to. I still live in Meadowbrook Hills. I still clear snow every winter. And I still work from home as a freelance software developer, which gives me the flexibility to be up at 6 in the morning with a snow blower when my neighbors need me. The HOA board is competent and reasonable. The community is stronger than it was during the Brenda era. And every time I fire up that snow blower and head down to the community center, I am reminded that being a good neighbor is worth the effort, even when it requires standing up to bad leadership and waiting patiently for justice to take its inevitable course. The plaque is still there by the entrance, a small metal rectangle that most people probably do not notice. But I notice it every time I clear the path, and it reminds me that communities function best when people contribute freely, when leadership serves rather than controls, and when someone is willing to say no to unreasonable demands, even if it makes things temporarily uncomfortable. Brenda taught me that lesson without meaning to. She thought she could ban someone from helping and face no consequences. She thought her position gave her unlimited authority to make decisions based on personal preference rather than community need. She thought wrong. And in being wrong so spectacularly, she accidentally created a situation where the entire community had to examine how it was being led and make a choice about what kind of neighborhood they wanted to live in. They chose well. We chose well. And every winter, when the snow falls and the temperature drops and Minnesota reminds us why we invested in good winter coats, I am out there at 6 in the morning, snow blower roaring, pathway clearing, doing what neighbors do. Not because I have to, not because anyone can make me, but because it is the right thing to do and because I finally have the respect and appreciation that volunteers deserve. The snow will keep falling. The pathway will keep getting cleared. And the story of the HOA president who banned the volunteer and then panicked when she needed him will keep getting told at neighborhood gatherings. A cautionary tale about the dangers of petty authority and the importance of appreciating the people who make your community better without being asked. That is how it should be. That is how it is. And that is how it will stay as long as I have a snow blower, winter mornings, and a neighborhood worth helping.